Yo, what's up guys, it's your boy Sami here. Today we are gonna see, what if Naruto was half bijuu, part 2, hope you'll enjoy this video. So before we start please subscribe to our channel, and like this video. So let's get into the video. Naruto didn't know why he had never learned about his sister's burden. He supposed it was just common knowledge around the village, yet maybe he was just too young to learn about the secret of the Kyuubi. Naruto regretted opening that book now, because then he would have never understood the terms Kyuubi and Jinchuriki. He was 6 years old, god damn it. He didn't need to know about such horrible things yet. And, as he looked at his sister's smile, and laughed, he wondered if she didn't know about the great being residing within her at that very moment. The whole discovery made him view his sister in a different light. It wasn't anything like hatred, or that he believed Haruki was the fox. No, it was a different kind of feeling. A stranger feeling. Was it jealousy? Naruto didn't know, but why would he feel jealous that his sister held such a terrible being? The thought confused him greatly, sort of, as if he weren't acting like himself. Maybe it was because of that one thing, that one little thing that Haruki didn't even choose for herself, that her life was so great. People around the village treated her like a god, he realized. She was surrounded by two loving parents who would do anything for her. She had never been sick in her life, and to top it all off she was now the heiress to the family, even though it was his birthright. There was also that slight bit of fear now, knowing that if she ever called upon that power, she could crush him in an instant, no matter how great of a ninja he became. God, he was pathetic, being afraid of his baby sister. But he had resolved to become a ninja after what he had heard in his parents' bedroom, but nothing seemed to be paying off for him. He didn't feel any stronger or more skilled, while his sister seemed to be advancing in leaps and bounds under his parents' tutelage. He supposed it was because of his parents, but even if he did resolve to become a ninja, by no means did he want any special treatment. It would just mean that he had good teachers, and didn't do any of this himself. No one else his age seemed to be afraid of his sister, Naruto noted, but he doubted they knew what was inside of her. Even today, when all of her friends were over for her 5th birthday party, they laughed and played with her, oblivious to what was on the inside. He had retreated away from the group of 4 and 5-year-olds soon after they had arrived. His mother, now heavily pregnant, supervised the group of children with several other parents, and hadn't even noticed him slip away from the crowd. Haruki on the other hand was having the time of her life. She had received several nice presents from her family and friends, including one nice surprise from Jiraiya, who had told her that he would help her parents with training her when she became a genin. The little girl had squealed in delight at that, while several of her friends looked on in jealousy at the lucky girl. She had latched onto Jiraiya after that, causing the pervert to humorously try and pry her off his leg. Come on, everyone. Let's go outside and play ninja, the girl exclaimed as she finished opening her presents. The other kids cheered, following their friend out to the back door. The adults laughed as they saw lazy Nara Shikamaru unenthusiastically walk outside last. Minato, who had just come back from the kitchen with refreshments for the adults, nearly dropped them as he saw his little daughter bound outside with all her friends. Wait, Haruki. He called out to her, thrusting out a hand, as soon as he put the beverages down on the table. There's one more special surprise you need to be told, he yelled as she passed through the door. It can wait, Daddy. I wanna play ninja now. Ninja. Ninja. She called back, unconcerned of her father's plight. Minato sighed as Shikamaru shut the door behind them, exasperated by the child's temperament. Kushina sauntered up to him, giggled as she held her pregnant belly. She's quite a handful, isn't she? She said, as she leaned in to kiss her husband. Minato smiled back at her, and returned the kiss, his previous emotions giving way to laughter. She sure is. I don't think she realized that this was probably the most important thing. Haruki's right, Minato. The party isn't over yet, and it can wait until the children come back inside, Kushina said, looking fondly out the window to the children who had just started playing. Haha. I gotcha. Haruki cried, as she hit the young Inizuka Kiba with her cardboard shuriken. He had taken to hiding behind a tree in the Namika's personal training, when his hiding spot was given away by Chaoji again. Ah, nice job Chaoji. You blew my cover again. Kiba shouted at the large boy, but from the smile on his face, it was clear that he was having fun anyway. Haruki giggled back at her two friends, before flinging her arm around her best friend Hyuga Hinata, who blushed from being put on the spot. She was clearly the polar opposite of Haruki, but for some reason the two had struck a chord in each other's hearts. The 4 kids heard some more shouting in the distance, and it was apparent that someone else had been caught. Come on Hinata-chan, let's go. We're definitely going to catch more people, and won't let the others outdo us. She shouted, and was about to leave the 3 of them in the dust. Hey, look, Kiba said suddenly, stopping Haruki from going somewhere else. There, on the 2nd floor of the Namika's mansion, visible from the 3rd window from the left, was a small blonde-haired boy, slightly shrouded by the window's curtains. Haruki turned to see where Kiba was pointed, a glazed look in her eyes appearing. Oni-chan, she said distantly. Over the past few months, she had noticed that her brother was becoming more and more distant, and quite frankly, the thought made her very sad. Naruto seemed to notice that they were staring at him, and he quickly ducked out of view. It's your weird brother, Haruki, said Kiba bluntly, laughing a little at the thought of the young blonde's personality. Her friends usually tried to avoid talking about her brother, as they knew what reaction it stirred from Haruki. Kiba was a different case, however. Haruki glared at him weakly for his barbed insult of her brother. I've never seen him before, commented Chaoji. Kiba snickered, knowing exactly the reason. That's cause he goes up to his room every time one of us comes over here. It's completely different from the way you act, Hinata. At least you are friends with us, and do things with us, but he never even talks to any of us. I think he's ashamed of something, Kiba said, a grin coming onto his face at his brilliant theory. What are you saying? Kiba said to Haruki a little more forcefully. My mom says that your brother's a disgrace to your family. Your mom and dad might think that way too, seeing that he doesn't even want to become a ninja in a family that creates incredible shinobi. She thinks that he's undeserving of the Namikaze name. But Naruto Nai-chan, not wanting to become a ninja, Haruki stuttered, almost refusing to believe it. It was the first time in a while since anybody had ever gotten under her skin like that. Kiba held up his hands defensively. Hey, I'm just telling you what my mom thinks. No need to get so worked up over it. Haruki turned away from the boy, not wanting to hear more about the matter. Let's go, Hinata, she said angrily. We've got a game to finish. But even as she said that, Kiba's words rang in her head, and the young, impressionable girl couldn't stop the cold, dark feeling of shame rise deep within her stomach. Minato was very surprised when his previously cheerful daughter came inside from playing in a less than happy mood. The other kids seemed painfully oblivious to their friend's behavior, and continuously harassed and played with each other. Only little Inuzuka Kiba and Hyuga Hinata seemed to notice the change that occurred in his daughter. For that, he was at least thankful. Kushina looked at him awkwardly, seeming to notice the same thing as he did. The Yamanakas seemed to be whispering to themselves something, and he had a strange feeling that it had something to do with his daughter's sudden mood change. The other children seemed to go sit with their parents or guardians, leaving the birthday girl to wander on up to both him and Kushina. She stood there about 3 feet in front of him, her fists clenched, and her eyes pointed towards the ground. Haruki, Kushina began cautiously. Are you ready for your last big surprise? Haruki seemed to brighten up slightly at that, and looked at her mother with big curious eyes. Well, I think it's best to let your father explain this to you, Kushina said, passing the buck off to her husband. Minato bent down to her knees, placing his hand on top of his daughter's head fondly. The little girl closed her eyes, and smiled lightly, as she enjoyed the feel of her father's strong, warm hand on her head. Minato grinned widely, feeling such immense pride in her. Haruki, ever since your brother entered the academy a year early, I believe it's necessary for it to become a tradition in this household. And, well, you may have noticed that Naruto isn't exactly, inclined to become a ninja. Haruki felt like a stone was just dropped into her stomach. I believe you'll have a much greater disposition, and fare much better, as a ninja than your brother. Minato felt slightly awkward at such a blatant show of favoritism, and even Haruki seemed to notice that there was something wrong. He had expected his daughter to be beaming at him right now, but instead he saw that the girl's cheeks were slightly flushed, and she seemed tense. Minato stood to his full height, adopting the fake persona of the stern, yet benevolent Hokage. Namikaze Haruki, by order of the village of Konohagakure, I have hereby enrolled you in the academy, so that you may study the art of the ninja, and serve this village to the best of your ability. Minato couldn't keep a smile off his face, as he saw his daughter's look of wonder grow. From directly upstairs out of sight, a small figure watched the parents cheer, and the children threw fits of jealousy, and all that he could do was scowl. Weeks passed by, as the academy got out for the year, leaving Naruto to stay at home on break. Well, before Naruto saw Haruki in a new light, it was also that Haruki saw Naruto in a new light. She never forgot the words Kiba had spoken to her at the birthday party, but every time she saw her brother's face, she had to ask herself whether he really was bringing shame upon their family. Some days she hated him, but on most days she just felt sorry for him. He hadn't looked like he had improved a single bit in his first year at the academy. It was truly pitiful. She was beginning to lose faith in him. Haruki did in fact love her brother, and the days when he was on break from the academy, he wasn't as surly, and he didn't retreat out of sight. He would go up to their mother every night and listen to her belly, which was an action that made the pregnant woman smile. Their mother was due for her third child any day now, and unknown to Haruki, she would be able to deliver like a normal woman now, considering she no longer carried the Kyuubi. While her mother was preparing for the birth, her father was preparing all the paperwork that would get her into the academy. It wasn't that difficult of a process, since he was the Hokage, and had total power when it came to the military of the village. It was the last night before they were to begin academy classes, and Naruto had grown increasingly more moody as the night went on. He didn't even touch his dinner that night, but it was ramen after all. He just sat there at the table, staring at his empty bowl, and the large pot of the stuff that the rest of the family was devouring without mercy. And then, out of nowhere, he saw his mother make a very strained face, before rising from her chair, and clutching her swollen belly. Naruto's eyes widened, and he had a strange feeling about what was happening. Minato seemed to sense it as well, rising from his chair shortly after Kushina did with an alarmed expression on his face. Kushina. Is it? Minato trailed off, leaving his question unfinished. Kushina looked slightly panicked now, and was clutching her stomach in agony at the contraction. She rushed over to her husband, and glared at him while grabbing his Hokage robes forcefully. Yes, Minato. I'm having the damn baby. So stop spacing out, and get me to the hospital this instant. She shouted. Minato freaked out at that, though not as much as he did the first and second time. He danced about like a madman, shouting random instructions to his kids, and trying to soothe his wife. He considered calling the Anbu, and having them use Shunshin to get her to the hospital. However, there might be too much of a jolt for a pregnant woman to take. The only option right now was to carry her to the hospital on foot. Minato grunted slightly, as he picked up the pregnant woman, who was thrashing slightly, but was fully aware of what was going on. With his wife in tow, Minato headed for the front door, a no-nonsense look on his face. Naruto, Haruki, you two will probably have to stay here with the Anbu overnight. I will likely be at the hospital all night and through tomorrow, so you'll have to get to school on your own. Naruto, since you're older, make sure to show your sister what to do on her first day, understand? Naruto nodded shyly, to which Minato smiled. Good. Once school is over, I'll come get you, and take you to the hospital, and you'll see whether you have a new brother or sister yet. As his father rushed out of the door carrying his pregnant mother, Naruto felt like he was almost in a daze. Naruto didn't think that he'd be the one who woke up his sister the next day. In fact, he believed that it would be at 6 in the morning when his younger sister came bounding into the room like the high-energy girl she was, and raucously woke him up by pounding him. But that wasn't the case. His lackluster attempt to get out of bed was just a sorry excuse for not wanting to go back to the ninja academy. Just because he was resolved to become one to protect his family's image, didn't mean he didn't have feelings of doubt or reluctance. It was just another type of resolve. He grumbled, as he walked out into the hall, and down towards his sister's room near the edge of the stairs. He opened the door, feeling the familiar musty smell wash all over him. Even as a 5-year-old girl, Haruki had no desire to fill her room with frilly things or anything pink in nature. Instead, her room was adorned with posters, scrolls, and the occasional faux weapon hanging on the wall. A giant banner displaying the kanji for determination hung over the front of her bed, and the wooden floors held a giant rug that was of the spiral that always was on the village's flak jackets. That was not to say it was without toys. Her closet was littered with Haruki's beloved playthings, and several of them were thrown out all over the floor. Naruto resisted the urge to complain about the mess, but stopped, and then resisted the urge to laugh, as he viewed his sister's ridiculous sleeping position. Her body was thrown all over her bed, with her arms and legs spread way apart from each other. She was wearing her favorite pajamas today, which were a soft lavender color with pictures of steaming ramen bowls, which looked ridiculous in itself. Her long blonde hair was all tangled and messy, and a little bit of drool was leaking out of his open mouth onto her pillow. Naruto creeped up over to the bed, a slight creak in the floor, the only noise he was making. He rustled her slightly, then harder when he received no reaction. Ani-chan. She muttered, as she dizzily saw her brother standing over her. It's too early. See, come back in a few hours, she grumbled, as she lay down on her side. Did you forget, Haruki? Today is your first day at the academy. Classes begin in an hour, and Anbu-san downstairs says to get ready, as soon as possible. Haruki sat up in her bed, and frowned. Her brother wasn't being his usual meek self today. Maybe it was the birth of another sibling that had gotten him so agitated today. She wondered that, as she flung her legs out from the bed, and noticed that Naruto had already left the room. The two siblings ate breakfast in near silence, both still tense with each other, and both still tense about the arrival of the new baby. Naruto finished first, setting his dishes in the sink, and grabbing his schedule. He walked over to the door where the Anbu was ready to see them off, looking slightly annoyed with Haruki for her lagging. After 10 more minutes of waiting, which was by the way beginning to get on both Naruto and the Anbu guard's nerve, Haruki finally appeared at the front door, clothed in a small, little dress, and her sour, morning mood permanently evaporated. She waved to the Anbu giddily, who then proceeded to open the door for the two children. Haruki slung her backpack over her shoulder in a mimic of Naruto, and eagerly noted the sights of the village in the morning. As they walked through the streets of the village, Haruki skipped and bounded along excitedly, while Naruto dropped his pace down to a slow waddle, slouching over slightly as he walked. Haruki would grab his arm and beckon him over once she found something she liked, which would distract them yet again from their necessary destination. Ani-chan. That nice old lady over there always gives me candy when I come over to her shop, she said excitedly, grabbing her brother's hand and leading over to the small stand where the lady was. Oba-san. Haruki called over to the lady, who turned and seemed to be delighted by the girl's presence. Oba-san. Good morning, she cried, as she finally reached the stand, brother in tow. The old wrinkled woman of about 70 smiled warmly at the young Namikaze girl, before her eyes set on Naruto, and her smile faded a little, and an unreadable expression entered her eyes. Everyone in the village knew about the first child of the Namikaze, the scrawny, meek boy who seemed to have issues with being a ninja. Anyone with a brain enough knew that Naruto had a much higher chance of making Hokage, or at least a very high position of power within the village, simply due to his heritage. That seemed to set their nerves on end. Someone like him holding so much political power. It was kind of a bitter feeling, especially knowing that Haruki was such a better alternative, but would be less inclined to be anything because of her birth order. Of course, the woman didn't know that the title of Namika's heir had been switched in recent years. Oba-sen. Oba-sen. Haruki said, pounding her hands on the stand. This is my Nai-chan. Have you met him before? She asked. The old woman turned a slightly frosty gaze on the young girl, which threw the girl for a loop, as the old woman was usually so amiable. No, we haven't met before, Haruki-chan. Though I know who the first child of Hokage-sama is, she said. Haruki frowned, and stopped beating her hands against the wood. She didn't like the tone of voice the elderly woman was taking, and all it seemed to do was perfectly validate Kiba's earlier words about her brother. She wasn't a good reader of emotions, but damned if she didn't realize that that woman had a problem with her brother. The awkward situation wasn't progressing well, so Haruki grabbed her brother's hand again, and led him away from the stand. The old lady called out to her about free candy, but Haruki just ignored her. As they walked through town over to the academy, Haruki pointed out more people who seemed to look away when they spotted Naruto, or people who began whispering under their breath. An angry blush formed on her cheeks, as she began to pick up speed, becoming more and more embarrassed about this the further they got into town. Naruto seemed to be feeling awkward about it, as well, and he avoided her gaze when she turned back to look at him. As they entered the academy grounds, Naruto sighed in relief when he realized they weren't late, and parents escorting their children stood outside the building surrounded by a few academy instructors, chatting with them about their child's education. But that relief changed to panic, as he saw all of the academy instructors and students file into the building, while the parents said goodbye to each other, and went off to do their daily business. No, we're gonna be late, cried Naruto, as he broke free of his sister's grip and began running towards the school. Haruki followed closely behind him, surprised at his sudden behavior. The 5-year-old girl followed closely behind him, easily catching up to him, as he approached the building. The two siblings marched through the grass, but sitting on the stairs up to the building were 3 people that Naruto didn't want to see. The 3 bullies, who had repeatedly abused him last year, were all sitting on the steps stitching class, and apparently very pleased, as they all laid their eyes on him. Naruto backed up a little bit, trying to avoid a confrontation, but he took a step back, as the 3 groupies began to stand up. Who are they? Asked Haruki subtly, righteous, getting a bad feeling from those 3 much bigger boys. Bad people, said Naruto simply. Get out of here, Haruki. I don't want you getting caught up with them too. Just run away, and come back in a few minutes to see if it's clearly instructed by Naruto. The Haruki didn't move. She simply stood there, eyes fixated on the 3 bullies, refusing to listen to her brother's words. Go, shouted Naruto. Too late. Is this, Namika's, your new girlfriend? Came the obnoxious voice of the leader bully. After hearing one of the most cliché greetings by a bully ever, the 2 Namikazes realized how big of trouble that they were in. She's not my girlfriend, Toji. She's my sister, and she's starting her first day at the academy. Toji scrutinized the young girl, then looked at Naruto, and then at Haruki again. After a few quick once-overs, the big 8-year-old seemed to hold in his laughter for a moment, before it evolved into a full-blown laugh fest. That's rich. Toji laughed. Guys, take a close look at these 2, and tell me what you notice. He wheezed heavily, before going back to more laughter. The other 2 bullies squinted stupidly, as they looked at the 2 nervous Namikazes, before they too burst out into peals of heavy laughter. Toji laughed even harder when he realized his friends had gotten it too. Namikaze pointed at Naruto in between laughter. That girl is your younger sister. He paused to allow more laughter. And looks bigger and stronger than you do. Toji collapsed onto the ground. Both Naruto and Haruki were seething in rage. You're an even bigger wimp than I thought. Naruto's eye began to twitch, and Haruki stared in awe, as an attitude she had never seen before in him began to occur. Maybe all the emotional stress of handling these jerks was finally getting to him. Something in Naruto seemed to crack, and Naruto calmly yet eerily walked slowly over to where Toji was kneeled over in laughter. He cast as big a shadow as he could over the larger boy, who was still paralyzed from laughter. He might never get another chance like this again, it was now or never. He raised his fist in the air, breathing out of his mouth in pure rage. After what seemed like an eternity, the young brought it down on the much larger boy. The fist connected with the bully's cheek, and all the laughter was propelled out of his system, as soon as he felt the forceful blow. Toji was knocked back slightly by Naruto's punch, and his face connected with the ground with an audible pounding noise. Haruki had her mouth open at the scene. Naruto was never this aggressive. She didn't know what had gotten into him. Toji. The other 2 bullies cried simultaneously, as they watched their leader get pounded. Unfortunately, however, the lead bully was far from unconscious, and his previous laughter gave way to cold, piercing anger, as he got to his feet, and wiped the small snuff mark off his face. Namikaze. The bully roared, hoisting Naruto up by the collar of his shirt, and holding him at arm's length. Naruto was beginning to seriously regret his moment of impulse, considering Toji was much more proficient in taijutsu than he was. Haruki heard a sickening crack as Naruto fell to the ground after receiving a much more devastating punch than the one he had given. Using his superior shinobi skills, Toji jumped over to where Naruto was lying prone in an instant, delivering a nasty downward punch at the fallen boy. The punch acted upon the force of gravity, and all the air was driven from Naruto's lungs. Naruto gasped for breath and clutched the wound on his chest. Some blood got in his eye, and he was only dizzily able to see the ongoing scene through one of his eyes. "Stop it!" yelled Haruki, rushing to her brother's aid. Even in a constricting dress and sandals, Haruki's training with her mother and father paid off, and her fluid jutsu helped her immensely, as she thanked God that Toji was leaving himself wide open at that very moment. Haruki's foot implanted itself with the older boy's chin, as the little girl sent him a surprisingly powerful kick upwards. The bully was separated from his prey for a moment, being disoriented from the girl's attack. Toji exclaimed angrily, not expecting the girl to attack him at all. Haruki didn't respond to Toji, instead putting up her hands in the familiar seal of the Bunshin no Jutsu. As she already knows, Toji said in surprise. However, the technique widely considered to be a joke continued to remain as a joke as Toji's two groupies snuck up behind the Namikaze prodigy. No matter how much of a prodigy, she was still only 5 years old and too inexperienced to defend against the onslaught of the two bigger and older boys. She needed more training, she realized, as she was sent to the ground. Toji regained all his confidence when he saw the display from his two friends. The two boys continued to attack the poor girl until her hair was strewn everywhere, her dress was tattered, and she was bruised in many places. Toji laughed raucously, sauntering up to the fallen girl. "Look at this closely, Namikaze. Because of your pitiful weakness, your little sister is going to suffer," he said cruelly. Naruto stared in horror as the bullies went all out on his sister, punching and kicking her with all their might. The 5-year-old cried out in pain, screaming his name and her father's name, and begging to be released from his torment. He attempted to move, but found that his legs weren't responding to his thoughts. The thoughts of Haruki being in pain allowed him to inch along in sheer determination, but he couldn't even walk in this state, let alone fight off the bullies. Naruto felt an enormous feeling of shame, and he just wanted to fall off the face of the earth at that moment. His little sister was suffering because of him, and Naruto couldn't even do anything about it. The thought was heartbreaking. What had he been doing that last year? He thought he had resolved to become a ninja. For one agonizing minute, the three bullies continued to torment his sister, before they finally got bored and rushed off to class, leaving Naruto and Haruki to lie there on the ground, injured. Haruki, Naruto managed to say, feeling almost unworthy to address his sister this way. Haruki was eerily silent, and was struggling to rise to her feet, brushing off her tattered dress, with her face pointed to the ground. Haruki walked over to her fallen brother, his face shadowed by her messy hair. Haruki, Naruto repeated, and his mouth opened in shock and sadness. Tears were pouring from Haruki's hidden eyes, running down her little cheeks, and dripping onto the ground. "Why?" she asked angrily, staring at Naruto with little more than contempt. "Why did you have to challenge that boy? Everyone around the village knows that you have no talent as a ninja, so why would you challenge him when you should know better?" Naruto's eyes widened further at his sister's angry tone. "Everyone's ashamed of you because they think that you are undeserving of the Namikaze name. And I'm starting to believe that they're right. I'm starting to become ashamed of you, as well, Naruto." Haruki shrieked, for the first time not using the honorific. Haruki hobbled away from her brother after an event that would forever change her. No longer would she be the happy-go-lucky girl. Now, she will begin to take her studies more seriously. All of this had gone too far, and she had gotten beat up simply because of her brother's weakness. She would no longer be cordial with her brother. Now she would begin to resent him in a way not unlike everyone else. She was now fully ashamed of him. An hour later, Naruto would find the strength necessary to move himself from his spot and walk into his second-year classroom feeling like a real scumbag. He was just in time to hear about a field trip later in the year. To be perfectly honest, it wasn't Minato's best day in his life. Naturally, when he had stepped out of the hospital for a bit of fresh air, the nurses rushed out 5 minutes later, proclaiming that his wife had gone into labor. It was only natural that the man would freak out after that, snapping at the nurse, and then rushing into the hospital at top speed to confront his wife. But of course, he had to get lost in the long corridors of one of the places he hated most in the world, and it took him another 5 minutes to finally find the maternity ward. As he approached the door, he heard the sound of a crying baby startling him. The Hokage looked quite silly, jumping at every little noise like a fool, and struggling to turn the handle to the door, because his nerves were shot. "Kushina," he cried, as he finally opened the door, and was relieved to see his wife sitting relaxed on the bed, a beautiful happy smile adorned on her face. She was worn out, yet very happy, the telltale sign of a successful birth. "Minato, you missed it," Kushina admonished, almost looking annoyed with her husband. But then, she weakly pointed to one of the nurses, who was carrying a small bundle wrapped up in a blanket. "Is that?" he asked rhetorically, knowing full well what it was. The nurse smiled at him. "Congratulations, Hokage-sama. Your wife has given birth to a beautiful, healthy baby," she said, readying the bundle for his father. May I see my baby's face? Minato asked weakly. The nurse smiled again. Of course, she replied, undoing the blankets that unveiled the baby's face. Congratulations. It's a girl. Naruto didn't pay attention in class for the remainder of the day. His mind was already too clouded with the events that were going on in his life. He vaguely wondered if the baby had been born yet, and how it would view him as they grew older. Luckily for his grades, however, there wasn't much taught in the curriculum that would affect it in any way. The first hour of the class was spent talking about the field trip that would occur in a couple of months. Apparently, they would be traveling to the site of the Battle of Kikyo Pass, and learn about the events that took place there. On the way there, they would be doing some basic terrain identification, and training within the southeastern section of High no Kuni's forest. Naruto remained silent the entire day, and was still silent when Iruka had placed a permission slip on his desk. Except, it wasn't more of a permission slip than a contract. Meaning if they were somehow attacked on the way there, and students were killed, then it was not the village's fault. Naruto had found out that it wasn't their fault on more than one occasion. The bell rang for the day, and Naruto, as usual, waited in his seat for Toji and his thugs to file out before he left. The bad part about it was that Iruka occasionally started to reprimand him, because all the sensei's attention was directed at him. Fortunately for him, he snuck out of the classroom without any kind of lecture. When he got outside, he was supposed to meet his sister at the front gate of the academy, so they could walk to the hospital together, but he was currently having the unpleasant experience of almost being trampled over by much larger students. He reached the front end of the academy 3 minutes later, but his sister was nowhere in sight. Most of the students were filing out of the gate, and pretty soon he was left nearly alone on the desolate academy grounds. He finally spotted her walking towards him a few minutes later, no usual spring in her step. Instead, it was replaced with a slow, sullen walk, and a stoic expression on her face. Her dress was still in tatters. When the girl spotted him standing at the gate waiting for her, a light fury ignited in her eyes, and she bolted into a run. Shoving a surprised Naruto out of the way, she ran off into the street on her own, leaving Naruto in the dust behind her. Naruto gingerly got to his feet. His sister was becoming more and more hostile to him, and that thought was making him sad. She resented him so much that she wanted to run away, even while injured. Naruto watched her disappear into the distance with pained eyes, and he slowly set off to go home, permission slip in hand. He just hoped that his sister wouldn't stay mad at him forever. Haruki finally calmed down once she had gotten away from her stupid brother. He had been such a dampener on her mood for the entire day, and she didn't need that in the slightest when she was about to look upon her newborn baby sibling for the first time. She stood outside her mother's hospital room, and reproachfully touched the doorknob, as if she were debating on whether or not to open it. She sealed herself, and swung open the door. Her parents turned around when they heard the door open, and their faces turned to frowns when they saw that Haruki's dress was in tatters, and that Naruto was nowhere to be seen. Her father got up from his spot in a chair, while her mother remained in the bed rocking the new baby. "Haruki, what happened to you?" Minato asked, noticing the purple bruises all over her face and body. Haruki refused to meet the worried gaze of her father, and in a moment of weakness looked at the ground while tears poured from her eyes. Both of the parents' eyes were on the 5-year girl, as she cracked underneath their gaze. "Aiji got beat up today at SS school," she cried softly. Minato and Kushina's eyes widened, and Minato placed firm, yet gentle hands on Haruki's shoulders. "Tell me, Haruki, who's it that beat you up?" he asked, his tone containing little more than righteous anger. "These 3 bigger boys at S school. They talked about how they've beaten up Naruto for the past by year, and they beat me up because IW was related to him," she wailed. Minato's breath hitched in his throat. Those boys have been beating up Naruto for over a year. Then how come he had never noticed anything? Snapping himself out of his daze, he turned back to the crying girl, and wrapped his arms around her. The girl's breathing slowed after this happened, and she nuzzled into her father's chest. "SHH, it's going to be alright, baby. I'll go over to the academy later today, and see if we can get this whole bullying problem resolved," he said, as he stroked the back of the girl's long blonde hair. "Daddy," she mewed, and Minato noticed that his jacket was gradually becoming sopping wet with tears. SHH, it's going to be okay," he said, as he kissed the top of her head. He then let go, and looked down at his daughter with a firm, yet gentle look. "Where's your brother, Haruki?" he asked. Haruki squeaked, and avoided the gaze of her father. She didn't believe she would be able to avoid telling him what she did, so she thought it best to just come clean about it right now, to save her future problems. After being told what she had done, Minato stared at his daughter with a certain amount of sternness in his eyes. Haruki suddenly found her toes to be very interesting at that moment. Minato sighed. "What you did was very wrong, Haruki," he said, kneeling down, and turning her head to make eye contact. "Look at me. How do you think your brother feels now, being bullied for almost a year, and being blamed by you for your hardship?" he asked. Haruki shook her head, a clear symbol for no. "I bet he feels like the lowest form of life on earth right now, Haruki. Not because he has been bullied for the past year, but probably because he blamed himself for the bullies tormenting you, and you letting him know you feel that way is making it worse for him." "But," she began to protest. I don't want to hear your excuses, Haruki. We're a family, and families forgive each other's mistakes. The entire village of Konoha is based on this principle, with the will of fire proclaiming we must love and cherish our comrades and village. Or are you telling me that you're denying the ideals of the previous generations and are not a believer in the will of fire? He questioned, putting Haruki on the spot. Kushina had had quite enough. Minato, but she was cut off. I do believe in the will of fire, Daddy. And I do love the village. I love Konoha more than anything in the world, and I would gladly protect and cherish every single person in this village, Haruki proclaimed. Minato smiled brightly, radiating a feeling of warmth to the young girl. Good. But, if you truly believe in the will of fire, then I want you to apologize to your brother as soon as he gets home. Are we clear? He asked. Haruki nodded fervently, but inside was that feeling that she just couldn't apologize to him. That's my girl, said Minato, feeling proud of his daughter. Now, I believe we've made you wait long enough. Don't you want to meet your new baby sister? He asked the girl. The girl didn't react as much as they had expected, but they didn't know of the permanent change that occurred in Haruki that same day. Their vibrant little girl would soon be replaced with a colder, more serious one. She walked over to where the infant was being cradled by her mother, a shaky yet genuine smile forming upon her face as Kushina unveiled the baby's face. Hello, I'm your big sister. I hope we can be best friends, she said, desperately hoping that her new sister would be much stronger than their brother. Haruki absent-mindedly noticed that this girl looked nothing like her. Rather than the long, rich yellow hair, it was a coarse fiery red, thoroughly reminiscent of her mother's shade. Like her, she had no whisker marks or blemishes across her cheeks, though her skin tone was more in line with Naruto's than hers, which was odd for a newborn baby. She was a lot smaller than when she was a baby, though she may very well become tall in the future. We've decided to name her Yukiko. Isn't that such a pretty name? Much like yours, Haruki-chan, Kushina said happily. Haruki reached out to touch the baby, but the infant's eyes fluttered open at that exact moment. Surprised at the face that loomed forward, the baby began to bawl at the sight of her older sister, her cries echoing throughout the entire mansion. Haruki stepped back in shock, covering her ears, as her mother went to shush Yukiko. Minato smiled awkwardly at the incident, though his grin rapidly turned into a frown when he glanced upon his older daughter. I'm going to my room. I'll apologize to Naruto when he gets here, she muttered crankily, taking off out the door in a hurry. Minato's frown deepened. It looked like it was going to be a long week. Naruto's excitement at meeting his new sibling had been killed much earlier, when he had assumed that his other sibling now hated his guts. Instead of rushing to the hospital at his top speed, he instead wandered through the village like a zombie, not really taking in many of his surroundings. He reached the hospital about 15 minutes later, and received his mother's room number from the nurse at the front desk. But, while he was on his way there, he came across the person he wanted to see the most, and least at the same time. He met Haruki, as he was walking down the corridor of the second floor. Her eyes were surprised, and slightly angry when they met, and one could tell that she was not yet prepared to speak with him. Haruki whispered, his shock nearly as great as hers. He at least expected to meet her again with their parents, but right now they were in the same exact situation as they had been earlier. Haruki was being uncharacteristically silent. She hadn't bowled him over yet, just like she did a few minutes ago, but she seemed to be pondering something great, yet he just couldn't figure out what it was. Haruki's mind was indeed a raging storm. On one hand, she wanted to listen to her father, and apologize profusely to her brother to prove her ideology was not false, but there was another side to the argument that came into being. Every time she stared at his face, she recalled the incident that had happened earlier today. The bullies, with their mocking scowls and big fists. Her brother, who was supposed to protect her from them, was easily beaten down, leaving her to fend for herself. If he hadn't been so weak, all of this would have never happened, now or in the future. It wouldn't have. Those two options hovered around in her mind for a few moments, to forgive him or not to forgive him. Naturally, as a 5-year-old, she went with the most selfish option in this case, and the choice to not forgive him won out in her mind. She put her hands on her hips, and glared at him forcefully. Just to let you know, I'm never going to forgive you for what happened here, so don't try and get me to apologize. She scoffed, turning her nose into the air, and walking by him. Naruto slumped. He had been expecting a reaction like that, but the reality of the situation still hurt. He was about to walk past to go to the room, but Haruki was going to say one last thing. Oh, and by the way, Tu-chan asked me to apologize to you, so if you could, tell him that I did okay. She added. Naruto gulped in slight fear. There was definitely the hint of a threat in that sentence. And with the Kyuubi backing her up, she could easily make his life a living hell. Naruto's paranoia made him nod, to which Haruki seemed satisfied. Like Haruki before him, he entered the hospital room gingerly, taking his time with the doorknob. But, relief washed over him when he realized that his parents were pleased to see that he was alright. His father asked him about it earlier, to which he said that he had met Haruki, and she had apologized to him. They didn't know how big of a lie that actually was. His father vaguely told him to go meet his new sister, and he only half listened to his speech. The thought of Haruki entered his mind again, and he realized that there might be two Harukas around the house from now on. But, as soon as he laid eyes on her, all those feelings of doubt and paranoia washed away. The mere sight of the red-haired infant girl was enough to take his breath away. He vaguely remembered a similar feeling from 5 years ago, but today would be the only time he would remember it clearly. The baby looked so weak and so innocent that it looked like just a touch from even him would break her instantly. Kushina smiled at her oldest look of wonderment at the new family member and leaned the girl closer to her oldest sibling. The infant girl fluttered her eyes open, and unlike before, she didn't freak out at the sight of a new rival. She eyed her brother curiously, especially when he lifted a shaky hand to touch her cheek. Yukiko laughed at the contact, surprising everyone in the room. As Naruto tried to move his hand away, she raised her little hands and grasped one of his fingers. He dumbly watched as Yukiko placed his index finger in her mouth, still giggling as she sucked on it. Naruto's dumb look was replaced by a look of pure joy, and he produced a more genuine laugh than he had done in months. 3 months later, life went on, as normal in the Namikaze household, even after their newest arrival caused all of them a great deal of turmoil. They all aged a little bit, with both Naruto and Haruki passing their birthdays, and Yukiko's growth becoming more evident. Naruto was still struggling with his ninja training, while Haruki was still thriving under it. Naruto had finally accepted his father's training, though he had shown no signs of rapid improvement under Minato's tutelage. Everyone was beginning to realize that maybe Naruto just wasn't cut out to be a ninja. Haruki still avoided him like the plague, ditching him in the academy grounds as soon as she got the chance. Meanwhile, Yukiko still adored him, always at her happiest when he was around. She also cried when he was away for too long, which is what she would be doing while he was away on the 2-day field trip. Naruto didn't want to go, but this was a mandatory assignment for anyone who wanted to pass the class, and his parents were making him go. So, here he was, accompanied by 5 Chunin Academy instructors, and the rest of his class through the southeastern portion of the Hai-no-Kuni forest. He leafed through his survival book at an alarming rate, trying to know about the various hazards that existed throughout the forest. They were planning to reach the battle site by tomorrow morning, so they had all day today to catalog some helpful information for their future lives as ninja. Iruka, who was leading the charge, would occasionally stop walking and explain to them something about a particular plant or something. Needless to say, it wasn't very entertaining. But the real kicker for them was when it was time to break into groups. Naruto had been dreading this ever since this field trip had begun. After all, no one in the class was particularly fond of him, though some of the kids were worse than others. Iruka had begun reading off the names of those who would break off into pairs, though Naruto wasn't really paying attention. He was just repeating one thing in his mind over and over again. Please don't be Toji. Please don't be Toji. Please don't be Toji. He prayed in his mind, so much that he didn't even register his name being called out, and his worst fears becoming reality. When Naruto finally opened his eyes, most of the other kids had gone. It felt like a rock dropped in his stomach after he saw who was sauntering up towards him, a wry smirk all over his face. It was Toji, and he was looking giddier than he had ever been before. Hey Namikaze. Looks like we're partners on this retarded assignment, buddy. He said sarcastically. Naruto gulped and nodded, while the much larger boy slung an arm around his shoulder. Iruka-sensei assigned us to bring back 5 types of medicinal plants, and identify 3 types of poisonous plants. Now, we're going to be going into the back section of the forest. He pointed to an incredibly dense section of the forest. And you're going to do all the work for me. And don't you dare send off the emergency flare that the senseis gave us. If you do, you'll be choking on those poisonous plants you're going to identify. You understand? Toji asked, while Naruto nodded frantically. Good. Now, we'd better get going before all the others get back. He added, roughly dragging Naruto back into the dense section of the forest. It would be the last time anyone saw either of them. I found something, yelled Naruto, once the two were away from the trail. Naruto seemed to be somewhat excited about identifying plants, but anyone could tell that Toji was just bored. He would probably take up his old habit of beating Naruto up soon. Atropa belladonna, or deadly nightshade. It's one of the most poisonous plants in the survival book. It seems to be able to grow here because of the thick shade cast by this very dense section. Naruto noted. The two were underneath the thick canopy of trees, and completely cut off from everyone else. So far, Naruto had harvested 5 health plants, and identified 2 poisonous plants, so with this last thing their mission would be done. Toji just sat on his ass the entire time. That's great, Namikaze. Just hurry up the harvesting before I punch you, said Toji lazily. Naruto grinned forcefully, even though he felt the need to rip the bully limb from limb. Toji was already walking into a deeper section of the forest, while Naruto struggled to bring up the rear. He wanted to identify more plants, but both of them noticed the landscape became increasingly more barren the farther they went, until eventually they reached a large clearing that was permanently withered. What happened here? Asked a bewildered Naruto. I don't know, said Toji seriously, before a wicked grin came upon his face, as he spotted a small cave over to his right. But, as Naruto was surveying the damage, he suddenly felt a sharp kick to his back. The boy grunted, painfully falling to the ground, while his notes and books flew all over the place. He was kicked again, this time in the head. It caused a light flow of blood to come from his forehead. It seems you've gotten everything that I need, so now I can take my time beating you up just like I always do. I'll just tell the senseis that you got roughed up by all the sharp plants in the forest. Toji punched Naruto again, causing a spurt of blood to come from his mouth. Toji relished in his pain, turned around to sniff the air. At that moment, he felt an intense, sharp pain puncture through his left leg. The older boy cried out in pain, and shakily looked down to see the source of it. There, lodged in his left leg, was a standard kunai held by academy students during their practice. He glanced over at Naruto, who had opened a small pouch on his right hip, apparently to grab that kunai. Toji ripped the blade from his leg, watching blood gush out of the wound. "You bastard. You bastard. Do you realize what you've done?" Toji roared. The bully walked over to the downed Naruto, and raised the kunai high above his head. Naruto's eyes widened in shock before Toji stabbed the kunai into the right part of Naruto's abdomen. The 8-year-old screamed similarly to Toji, through the part to when he was stabbed to when Toji yanked the kunai out of Naruto. Toji was prepared to stab again in his anger, but the adrenaline and blood lost to his leg finally forced it to give out, and Toji collapsed into the ground while dropping the kunai. Toji clutched his leg in pain, completely paralyzed to be able to do anything to Naruto. Naruto too should have been in a similar situation, but for some reason he felt like moving. It was as if some strange drug had just intoxicated his senses, and it was forcing him to move. It seemed to have a similar effect on Toji, who unlike him wasn't moving at all. Out of the corner of his eye, Naruto thought he saw some kind of faint wisp emerge from the cave a little ways away. The cave? Naruto hadn't noticed that before. It looked big enough to house him, and it would provide suitable shelter, because there was no way he would be able to make it back to the group with his injury. Naruto began to crawl over to the entrance of the cave, ignoring the wounded Toji. Every time his kunai wound would hit something, pain would rocket through his body, and he would pause for a few seconds. He felt inexplicably drawn to this cave for some reason, even though he had never seen it before in his life. From his view of the inside, it was indeed spacious enough to house him, and was completely free of moisture. Hopefully, he could rest here for the night, and recuperate from his wound. Either that, or the senseis would come to get them. Come to think of it, Toji took the flare away from me a little earlier. I don't get why he hasn't fired it off yet. He wasn't going to go back to Toji, and ask though. The short problem with the kunai had already reminded him of why he didn't want to become a ninja. He wasn't going back to Toji now, he just hoped that guy didn't get up while he was in the cave. He crawled into the cave, weakly testing the rock ceiling, so that it wouldn't cave in. The boy made his way towards the back end of the cave where he could relax against the hard rock wall. The cool shade of the cave relaxed him slightly, despite the fact that he had a shredded hip. The rock wall and dirt floor were cool to the touch, and the 8-year-old felt that he could fall asleep on it. He was about to fall asleep, but he saw a strange flash occur out of the corner of his eye. He swiveled perhaps too quickly for his injury, trying to locate the source of that flash, if there even was one in the first place. He almost sighed in relief when he saw nothing, but the sound of a clearly distinguishable hiss filled his ears after that moment. He didn't see anything, but it almost sounded like the hissing noise was coming from inside the wall. A few seconds later, Naruto saw it. It began as little more than a prick of the substance, but it grew rapidly, oozing out of the wall in a miniature waterfall. The substance was golden in color, though it didn't seem to be tangible enough to take on a solid form. Naruto desperately backed away from the wall, still watching the golden, chakra-like substance ooze out of the wall. When there was enough of it, it spread onto the floor, rapidly approaching Naruto. "No? Get away." He yelled at the wisp, backing into the farthest corner of the cave. But that turned out to be the wrong move, because, as soon as his back made contact with the wall, the strange yellow chakra began oozing out of the wall faster. The yellow substance easily disintegrated the flimsy layer of clothes on Naruto's back, and Naruto's skin, and the yellow chakra came into contact for the first time. The boy screamed in pain, as it felt like his entire back was being lit on fire. Naruto collapsed from the pain of having foreign chakra absorbed into his system, allowing more of the yellow chakra oozing out of the wall to attack Naruto's backside. In the meantime, the chakra coming out of the other wall had converged on Naruto, and the 8-year-old boy experienced the unpleasant sensation of being attacked by foreign chakra from all directions. The yellow chakra climbed up all sides of his body, until he was covered in a thick layer of golden energy from head to toe. And then, it happened. The boy was pretty much having the experience of drowning in a sea of fire. The foreign energy was on him in all directions. He was submerged completely in it, and it suspended him in midair, engulfed in a pool of chakra. The last of the chakra in the cave piled onto the boy, but Naruto was so delirious with pain that he couldn't see what happened next. Naruto's entire body was beginning to disintegrate, and Naruto would be conscious of all of it. The yellow chakra was doing corrosive damage to his skin. It started out by charring, but that wasn't enough, as the chakra completely destroyed the now blackened skin, creating little particles of black dust that spread out into the wind. Naruto vaguely noted in the excruciating pain that his skin had been vaporized, but the chakra was already beginning to attack his muscles and organs. Soon, they too shared the same fate, as the chakra consumed more and more muscle tissue. His chakra coils were completely eroded, and his abysmal capacity of chakra was completely consumed by the more powerful force. If anyone outside were to see the display, that would lay eyes on a grotesque skeleton being eaten away by chakra, little black bits of dust flying off the body. But the bones too held the same fate, and soon there wasn't even a small skeleton that remained in the way of the chakra's attack. After the bones had been absorbed, there was nothing. Absolutely nothing more than a large pile of black dust on the ground next to his swarthing mass of chakra. But Naruto was indeed still alive. His pain sensors had been destroyed along with his muscles, but Naruto had been too afraid to look. He tried to open his eyes, but found that he didn't even have any eyes. Yet strangely, when he did that command, he could see the entire world through his mind's eye. He looked around, and saw that this place definitely wasn't heaven. Come to think of it, this was the same exact place he had been before. Was he still alive? Relief coursed through his entire being. Phew, just a dream, his consciousness thought, but then Naruto took a look at his body. There was no body, just a yellow mass of chakra where his body had been. He tried to scream, but no sound came out. He tried to move, but he was only a soul trapped within chakra. That's right, he was a soul now. Just a leftover consciousness that the chakra had decided to keep. He would be dead, should be dead, but this chakra decided to keep his consciousness intact, and support it with its own substance. The new ethereal being tried to move, but found that the chakra was unresponsive to him. Rather, the chakra was moving his soul for the time being. Now that the failed bijuu had a consciousness, it instinctively knew what had to be done. Still, with such a weak consciousness of a human, it wouldn't become a very strong being, at least right from the get-go. Fueled by a consciousness, the chakra oozed out of the cave and into the clearing. It spread out over the entire space in the thicket, consuming the wounded Toji and everything else that would get into his path. Then, the chakra began to converge, and it grew, and grew, and grew. It grew until it was over 500 feet tall, and Naruto was already aware of the change in size. The chakra merged and bended until it was a rough shape of something, and that was when the real work would happen. The chakra began to shrink, becoming denser and denser in the process. It packed itself so densely that the chakra began to solidify. The chakra packed itself into makeshift bones and organs and a body. The final result was a being of about 100 feet, and it had a great resemblance to the animal called a lizard. The chakra's work done, it was time for it to go into a permanent sleep and allow their guest's consciousness to take control of the new body. Naruto didn't know what to think when he actually gained control of this new powerful body. On one hand, he had watched the entire process occur with the chakra creating this body, and apparently he had been randomly chosen to control it. The old Namikaze Naruto was gone, and its place was just this thing. Naruto looked at his gigantic body. He really was a freak. He was over 100 feet, for God's sake. He had golden yellow reptilian skin that was covered in these ugly scales all over his body. His eyes were these freakish, completely circular things. The eyes were colored a bright red, and his pupils were elongated. Below his neck, legs, and spinal cord, cruel-looking spikes that could gouge through a man's torso poked out of Naruto's ugly, yellow skin. On the ends of his 4 feet, there were ridiculously sharp claws that were almost 3 feet in length. He opened his mouth and felt serrated, sharp fangs, every single one of his teeth. And to top it all off, all he had on his ass was this pathetic little stump of a tail. His family would never want to see him again. His village would never want to see him. His family. His village. Naruto began to breathe heavily, mulling over the revelations. My family, my village, he breathed harder. My family, my village. He thundered in his mind. He attempted to scream those words into the wind, but all that came out was a series of roars and clicks. And Naruto knew this, as well. Naruto looked around himself insanely, and in his panic, tried to pursue the best course of action. But his clouded mind couldn't come up with a solution, and his churning emotions led the behemoth to bolt to the village, his massive weight knocking over trees as he pursued his goal. Yukiko was beginning to doubt his eyes when he viewed that enormous monster rise above the tree line. It was a bijuu, no doubt about it. Even if he had never seen a zero-tailed lizard be documented on records, the accurate feel of a bijuu's chakra was unmistakable. The other chunin had already noticed it too, but he silently prayed that none of the children actually turned around to view that monstrosity. The children didn't seem to feel the tension that had arisen within their senses, but they noticed that tension turn to fear when the new bijuu darted in a particular direction. The direction of Konoha. Aoba, get the children to safety at the Yukiko Pass battle site. It isn't safe for them to go back to the village at this moment. I'll head back to Konoha and warn Hokage-sama about the approaching danger. He whispered to his second-in-command for the field trip. Okay, but we're missing Naruto and Toji. Are you sure you want me to go on? Asked Aoba, doing a quick documentation of the children. Yukiko didn't hear any of that, his panic already setting him back towards the village. He just hoped he could get there before the bijuu could. Aoba muttered something under his breath, and hoped he could get the children away without them noticing anything. What? Are you kidding me? Roared Minato, when he absorbed what Iruka had just told him. No, I'm not, Hokage-sama. What I saw in the forest was a bijuu-class chakra beast that was currently heading in the village's direction. I've never seen this one in the textbooks before, but the resemblance to a bijuu is identical, said Iruka. What about your students? Asked Minato. I sent them ahead to safety with Aoba. I figured that it would not be safe for them to come back to the village. Minato slumped down in relief. So that means Naruto is okay. Minato grit his teeth in panic. So that was the heavy chakra that had fallen over the village. He knew he had a bad feeling about that chakra, but he couldn't quite place his finger on it. Sighing, Minato looked out of the window of his office, and his eyes widened when he took in the figure that was appearing from beyond the horizon. It was huge, it was a lizard, and it had the same feeling as a bijuu. There was no mistaking the resemblance in Iruka's report. Minato rose out of his chair, eyes fixated on the being. A scream broke off his daze, and Minato looked down to see that a few villagers had already noticed the great being approaching. The village was already being sent into a panic. Iruka Minato begins solemnly. I have a very important order that you need to fulfill. With that, Minato leaned in, and whispered the order in Iruka's ear. Iruka's eyes widened. Are you sure? He asked, not surprised when his leader nodded. Alright, the sensei agreed, but he paused when he reached the door. What about you, Hokage-sama? Minato sighed, and fastened his jacket around himself. Reaching into his desk, he pulled out a very special set of seals, scrolls, and kunai. I will engage the target. Naruto was nearly on the gates of Konoha, his panic-stricken mind towards. Maybe now he could get some help. No jutsu. Came a voice from directly in front of him. A large puff of smoke about his size appeared a distance in front of him, and this swarthy red toad smoking a pipe blocked his way. A small figure jumped onto the toad's head, and Naruto didn't know whether to be pleased or to panic. Dad. It's me, it's Naruto. He yelled, desperately trying to reach his father. But all that came out were the same roars and hisses that he had made before. His heart dropped into his stomach when he realized that his father couldn't understand him. Minato. Don't tell me you called me here to deal with a second bijuu attack. Naruto heard the toad say. I'm sorry, boss. But I need you to deal with this being right now. It resembles a bijuu, but it isn't one that we've documented yet. An undocumented bijuu. I didn't know there could be such a thing. Why should I have to fight something like that when we don't even know its strength? Asked Gamabunta. Blame Jiraiya-sensei for letting me sign the contract in the first place, said Minato, a grin coming onto his face. Gamabunta smirked for a moment, before it gradually evolved into full-blown laughter. It really is Jiraiya's fault, isn't it? Well, since you're my best summoner, and everything, I'll lend you a hand this time. Besides, this one can't be as difficult as Kyuubi Gamabunta commented. We're going to need some oil first, okay boss? Questioned Minato. You got it. Roared Gamabunta, as he spit oil out of his mouth at the great best. Minato flashed through some quick hand seals. Kaden. Kameu ending. Minato cried, igniting the oil with a quick fire technique. The oil went up in a burst of flames, which Naruto panicked, and moved his barely responsive body to the right. He attempted to retreat and go back later, but Gamabunta and Minato were ready for him. Gamabunta hopped over the beast and blocked his path away, but Naruto reflexively kicked his front right leg out. The lizard's claws penetrated the toad's right shoulder, but Gamabunta wasn't finished yet. The toad slowly drew his giant dagger, going for the kick slice to Naruto's reptilian head. Again, Naruto reflexively raised his other front leg, standing on his back and blocking the blow. Gamabunta attempted to slice through the arm, but found that the scales were just too tough. Boss. Cried Minato, as Gamabunta hopped back. Those scales are really tough. Commented Gamabunta. What should we do, boss? I don't know. We'll just have to keep fighting until something works. The two giant animals continued fighting for another 5 minutes, with Naruto gradually getting pushed back by the more powerful toad. Naruto had lasted this long on nothing more than reflexes, but that was all about to change. It was in the middle of the fight, when Naruto noticed all these chains seemed to wrap themselves around his body. Pretty soon, Naruto was completely restrained by them, and was rendered unable to move. Kushina. Minato cried happily, as his wife was sitting in a reclined position a ways away from the battle. She grinned foxily back at her husband, reassuring him of their victory. You can stop now, Minato. I've got him from here on, she said, flashing through some hand seals. Naruto's reptilian eyes widened when these enormous spikes materialized out of nowhere. 4 smaller ones, and 1 huge one, bigger than the rest, all pointed at him. Naruto had a sneaking suspicion of what was happening. Mom. Stop, it's me. He roared, but the same results as before happened yet again. Naruto roared in pure pain, as the 5 impaled him directly through his 4 feet and his chest. A surge of electricity coursed through his body, and he could see the spikes jutting out of the other end of his body. Their baby daughter was still asleep at her side, even when she drew lines all across her stomach, followed by a big black circle where her navel was. Kushina flashed through some more seals. No. No. Naruto yelled, as his body began to dematerialize again. His solid form became wispy again, even though it didn't dull the sense of pain at all. The now gaseous Naruto completely flowed into the markings on his baby sister's stomach, the ugly black markings disappearing as he did. The little girl didn't stir at all, completely unaware that her brother had just been sealed within her. Thanks for watching my video. Leave a like if you enjoyed my video, and also do consider subscribing to my channel for more awesome content. See you next time. Till then, sayonara.